Hello, thank you for watching. Looking down across the southwest today, not too much to look at across the west. Even if you look over at the coast of California here, finally gotten out of some of this May gray that's at least felt persistent at times here this spring. Just a lot of clouds and fog coming on shore, but not much of that today here just after lunch on Wednesday. Some high clouds maybe streaming through here in southeastern Utah into Colorado. If you look closely, I kind of consider things, at least for the purposes of this video, the continental divide and west. And then if you've noticed, naturally we kind of focus on some more of these agricultural areas. But if you get east of the divide, you can think of that out of the jurisdiction of this video. But it's kind of neat to see some of these storms blow up here in southwest Texas. And if you look closely, there's a boundary here between where some of these high clouds are going up, or I should say these low clouds, and then no clouds. That is the kind of semi-permanent dry line that we watch in April and May as a focus for severe weather. So it's not a surprise that this area is under a little bit more focus and scrutiny today from some of the meteorologists out there for some severe thunderstorms. Hopefully nothing too damaging or concerning. We can see some of these going up right here in an area that's favorable for hail. I mention that because what happens in the west, our weather, can affect what's going on east of the continental divide. Naturally, most systems in the kind of northern hemisphere move from west-east along the westerlies. It's the way the systems and the wind blow occasionally, right? We can get systems coming out of maybe more the southwest or the south coming up from that angle, maybe something like Hurricane Hillary, which impacted us last year, but mostly west-east, and that means that they have to cross, for example, California, right, Nevada, into Utah, and then finally out over Colorado, or maybe from New Mexico east, as I just mentioned, this dry line. And kind of curiously, in this area here, the Four Corners, parts of New Mexico, even getting down into northern Mexico, is dry. It tends to strengthen this dry line here that can get pushed or mixes east into the plains and is a focus for tornadic development and all sorts of severe weather and thunderstorms. You can see some of those going up here now. And if you think about it, it's been an active severe weather season across the central part of the country here as we've gone through April. These are just tornado reports from the Storm Prediction Center here. We've had a tremendous number of April tornadoes, unfortunately, in the Central Plains. Some of these were kind of individual outbreak days. You can see all over the place. A colleague of mine just last weekend here, I was in San Francisco. He was chasing severe thunderstorms over in eastern Nebraska and Iowa, Andrew Pritchard. And he got just incredible footage. A number of tornadoes. I actually lost count of how many he saw. Maybe the most incredible one was here in western Iowa. This is an EF3 tornado. It looks mean. It is mean. You can see the debris flying around here. Just an excellent shot. And then I encourage you to go look at his video footage from this day. You can look up Sky Drama on Twitter or a website or Google, and you'll take it right to him. His stuff, it's also on YouTube. Super impressive work, documenting these severe storms. You can see a close-up view of the edge of it and all the debris, unfortunately. As far as I know, this storm, no fatalities reported, which is good news. This was a separate tornado. He doesn't stick to one in one day. Apparently he can get into multiple. So this is in eastern Nebraska, where he saw yet another EF3 tornado there, another great shot. But just kind of curiously, if you think about last week, I was talking about where I was concerned about kind of dry weather getting entrenched across the west. And I mentioned this Four Corners region is an area. If we have a weak monsoon later in summer, we'll have to watch that area just for some increasing heat and dry weather. And, we've noticed in terms of severe weather forecasting, when this area in northern Mexico, even getting down through the Four Corners region, is dry, it tends to increase the potency of this dry line here. Can create instability in the atmosphere over Oklahoma, Kansas, even into Nebraska and Iowa, where I showed you those tornado footage thereabouts. So it's kind of curiously, the weather here in the west affects folks further east, at least a little bit. Another component to that is the snowpack. We talked this year about accruing more snowpack in a lot of these regions across the western U.S., namely the upper Colorado River Basin, the Sierra Nevadas, and that also can nudge and strengthen the jet stream a little bit further south. And as this comes further south, it picks up that dry line here. It can move that further into the plains. It's kind of a focus for low pressure development east of the Rockies, east of the divide. And you kind of combine these ingredients together, and that's how we've seen so many severe reports in April. So our snow, how dry we are, all these things play a role even farther east. Now, kind of curiously, for the purposes of this video and us, it doesn't really work in the reverse, right? Our weather moves from west to east, and right, we figured out last video that this is going to be west on the video, so west to east. That's going to take me a while to figure out, but nonetheless, it doesn't terribly too often work in the reverse, that the weather, over here to the east affects what's going on to the west. But nonetheless, curious, you get a winter storm warning or something, you never know how impactful or what the butterfly effect is going to be in terms of how the rest of the country might respond. So I thought it was pretty neat. Jumping up to kind of the northwest view here, looked at the southwest just a little bit ago. A little more active, right? At a glance, you get some high clouds out west here along the Pacific Northwest coastline. Even some snow showers kind of percolating in here in the Golden Triangle. Temperatures right here kind of mixed in the upper 30s right now just after lunch. So not, somewhere kind of between snow and rain up here. There's actually, curiously, a thunder report over here in the Bitterroot Range. So some of these were potent enough to actually get a brief, lightning out of them. But nonetheless, nothing too crazy here, just kind of a colder day. So you can just kind of tell by the clouds, the winds out of Canada here, bringing some colder temperatures in here, not as spring-like as we're dealing with further toward the south. Wanted to look at those temperature anomalies here. These are color-coded by the anomaly for today's forecasted high temperature, where we're just about at the apex of reaching here after lunch. You can see much colder here across northern states, particularly the Golden Triangle, under the influence of those northwest winds. You get south of Oregon and Idaho, much more spring-like here, not too hot really, across parts of coastal California, the Central Valley, lower Colorado River Valley, into Arizona as well. If we jump over and look at the absolute temperatures, I think that paints a little bit more obvious of a picture. High 70s in the Central Valley, a little bit cooler along the California coast, but still a beautiful spring day, not dealing with that May gray that we were earlier in April. If you look toward the south, lower Colorado River Valley, in the kind of low 90s, it's really where you get up here where you're talking 50s, high 30s, into the 40s, some locations, a little bit warmer here in eastern Washington. One concern is that cold weather tonight, temperatures are going to bottom out a bit. So if we look at the National Weather Service forecast minimum temperatures for tomorrow morning, that is Thursday morning, see a little bit colder concerns here. So particularly the upper Snake River Valley, talking potentially getting down into the mid-20s here. That's where we'd get into hard freeze territory, some of these upper locations. It's kind of yet to be seen how far those will extend west into the middle Snake River Valley. See some of these temperatures getting down toward 30, at least very into frost territory here, closer to Boise. So this is an area to keep an eye on here. And then those colder freezing temperatures approaching over here in the Golden Triangle, and maybe even some parts here in far eastern Washington. So a colder night ahead. We jump over and look at the National Weather Service advisories. These are active here this afternoon. Two things to note. There's those freeze warnings in the upper Snake River Valley, so that's far eastern Idaho, and then wind advisories here along the Sacramento Valley. So much windier day here across the Central Valley than is normal. And then that really kind of, wind advisory is not active for the San Joaquin Valley, but it is breezy here with some northwest winds kind of all the way through the Central Valley, with a trough kind of draped across this area here, pushing through. Jumping over, looking at the radar, you can see some of the snow and rain showers kind of mixed here across the Golden Triangle, even some of those here in eastern Idaho as well. Not really too much to talk about beyond that. You can see some of those high clouds here, maybe associated with some weak showers in southern Utah. Not even going to show the radar picture further to the south because we just saw, there's hardly a cloud in the sky. Not even some fog here extending through southern California. If we take a peek at the wind speeds above us, this is the jet stream level winds. You can see North America here. I'll kind of highlight the west coast. There's Cabo, up through California, British Columbia, etc. See this jet stream really focused here over the Pacific Northwest. That's why we saw a lot of the cloud cover pushing in, dipping into a trough here across the Northwest. That makes sense with what we just saw. We saw some rain, some snow, some colder weather, those freeze concerns tomorrow morning, and it's really this trough that is responsible for that. As you get south of that, we're talking about California, Arizona, Utah, you're not under the influence of a large ridge. That would look more something like this in the jet stream. So not bringing a lot of heat in. This is actually a good recipe, I think, for folks further to the south to have, a fairly nice afternoon here. I want to jump over and look at the ECMWF forecast for that jet stream just to see where we're going into the future and into the weekend here. I'll make this valid as of Wednesday afternoon. You can see that's very consistent with what we just saw on the slide before with that jet stream trough situated across the western U.S. We really look kind of right under that trough, if not a little bit toward the backside of it for some of the coldest temperatures. So that area would be kind of right in here. We'd expect some of those colder temperatures here tonight, and that's right where we drew those freeze warnings. We talked about the freeze and frost potential in the Golden Triangle and eastern Washington as well. So these troughs bring in, unfortunately, not your favorite weather unless you're rooting for cold temperatures in early May here, unfortunately. Take this forecast through Thursday. Maybe a little bit of a system trying to come onshore in Oregon, not too much to write home about. Maybe a little break in the weather on Friday, but if you look off the coastline here of British Columbia, you can actually see another, something of a kind of a compact but potent little trough here trying to come in toward Oregon, maybe with some onshore flow here in California. Let's take this forecast into the future. And now we have a trough situated right over Oregon, pushing that jet stream now into parts of California and Nevada. That is Saturday PM. Take this forecast out into Sunday morning and see that trough now positioned right over the west coast, actually diving a little bit further south than the one we're dealing with here on Wednesday afternoon. So unfortunately, the playbook here is colder temperatures, more inclement weather expected this weekend. This is now into Sunday evening, taking it into Monday and Tuesday. See a rather large long wave trough now situated across Montana, Idaho, perhaps Wyoming as well. Take this forecast out into the future, and boy, just not a huge change in the position of that trough. I was talking about that trough coming in kind of on the coastline off of Oregon, maybe as early as even like Friday PM, Saturday PM. Now this forecast is out to Thursday of next week around lunchtime. That's full on 7+ day forecast, and the west is still under the influence of this trough. Colder weather, at least over these states here, under the influence of it, and maybe extending a little bit further south to that into parts of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona as well. I'll play the forecast forward, just kind of hoping for a reprieve even into next week. And at least the European model forecast I'm showing here tries to have this trough stall here across the west region. I don't have a lot of confidence in that right now. If you look closely, just kind of toward the northwest here, see that rise in the jet stream here over British Columbia. This is a ridge that's been trying to sneak into the situation here. So it remains to be seen if that trough kind of retrogrades or goes from east to west. I just started this video talking about how our weather tends to go from west to east. Remains to be seen if that's going to really have that retrograding action, or maybe that trough, after it comes through over the weekend, tries to exit a little bit sooner and allows this ridge to build in across the west. That would be a big change in that forecast out to the middle toward end of next week. Toward the weekend, we'd be talking about warm weather, maybe drier weather, certainly not these colder temperatures if this long wave trough sets up over the western U.S. So there's some uncertainty in the forecast. Wanted to at least share that with you. Whenever I kind of see that uncertainty, I definitely jump over it and look at some of these other forecast model runs. So the one we just looked at was the European model. Okay, now I want to look at the GFS model. What's different about that one? How might that change where that forecast certainty is going forward? This forecast is what we just kind of went through. This is Thursday into Friday. Okay, this looks similar. There's that potent but compact trough coming in near California, Northern California, Oregon. That's going to kind of entrench over the area on Sunday. You can still see that jet stream focused right over the area and this big upper level trough kind of over Montana and Idaho on Monday. That makes sense. That was like really consistent with the European model. And then this situation, that big upper level trough, this is more over the Dakotas, eastern Montana, east of the divide, and this is Wednesday, May 8th. It does try to retrograde it again over the interior, at least the northern interior over Idaho, parts of California, but there's that British Columbia ridge trying to push in. So what we see here this time of year occasionally is these Rex blocks, and what we mean by that is a ridge here and a trough to the south that tends to block the pattern up a bit, and we do get stuck sometimes in that positioning going out into the future. What that would mean for folks out west is actually some warmer weather trying to push in along the coastline here, maybe out toward next weekend. Cooler weather potentially toward the south with maybe some more inclement showers here across the interior. We're less rainy this time of year, so this doesn't look like a huge precipitation pattern to me. More just unfortunately for folks underneath this trough, sometime at the end of next week, we'd be looking at colder weather and the occasional rain shower. If you go out forward into the forecast here, way out kind of beyond where I'd be confident making any sort of definitive forecast, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here with that ridge over it in Canada. This would be an upper level ridge with the jet stream rising in that kind of upside down U or hill shape. We have this cutoff low underneath it. This is looks a little blocky to me. What I mean by that, when we have these kind of cutoff lows, high pressure systems to the or upper level ridges to the north, that's what we call an atmospheric block, and it makes it hard for systems to come through and kick those out of there. So it can make the pattern a little bit more persistent out into the future. At the very least, let's go through the weekend and talk about the precipitation that we're expecting out of the immediate systems that we watched before we go back into that long-range forecast. Looking at potentially a weak system coming through very early tomorrow, overnight tonight. This would be impacting parts of the Willamette Valley, a little bit more snowfall in parts of the Cascades and the Cascade volcanoes here in through Thursday morning. That quickly skates through the area, bringing just minimal precipitation perhaps to eastern Idaho as we go through the day on Friday. That's when that potent upper level trough that we talked about really starts to come into the area here on Friday evening into Saturday morning for the Willamette Valley. A little bit of warmer conditions with less snow in the Cascades, but getting that rainfall up into the foothills. See, as that comes through on Saturday PM, now we have rainfall all the way through Central California and through the Sacramento River Valley, trying to sneak into the San Joaquin Valley a bit. And then potentially some more snow coming to the Sierra Nevadas, definitely more rainfall to the Sierra foothills, increasing the precipitation and rainfall there. If you look closely, even here Saturday PM, getting some rain here, trying to push into eastern Washington, maybe at times even into the Snake River Valley. It can be hard to do that this time of year, but seeing that in this potent upper level low as it comes on shore here Saturday evening into Sunday morning. Then if we look Sunday afternoon, seeing some snowfall here across central Oregon, lingering shower activity weakening through Sunday for the Willamette Valley, perhaps additional precipitation coming through here in eastern Washington, light showers here in the Golden Triangle of Montana. So take this forecast through, additional snowfall coming through for some of the upper Colorado River Basin. So this is really some areas here that feed into that upper Colorado River, which comes down through Utah into Lake Powell here. So I don't think this is bad news if we want to increase those levels on Lake Mead, Lake Powell, etc., increase the snowpack here across the interior. This snowfall valid as of Monday AM. Potentially looking at another weak system just kind of on the backside. These aren't uncommon with some of these big upper level troughs. That pushing through sometime Monday PM for the Willamette Valley, the Pacific Northwest. And then taking out into next week, that's kind of where we enter the fork in the road. If that trough situates over the area that's forecasted here, you can see what I mean by this trough kind of situated like this, not a ton of precip, just kind of these lingering interior showers, but it would keep temperatures down across this area, at least relative to average. That's what we're keeping an eye on going out into the future. If we got the Weather Prediction Center, their forecast for precipitation totals. I think this is kind of a moving slider, so you can see that rain come through Thursday morning. Not talking about very heavy amounts here in western Oregon. You can see some of those showers here, just weak amounts here in the Golden Triangle through this evening and tomorrow morning in western and northwest Montana. Then that next system comes through on Friday, dropping more significant precipitation here across the Willamette Valley, so talking more like 1 inch to 2 inches of rainfall at a little bit higher elevation there. And then some of that precip trying to get into the Sacramento Valley here, especially on the eastern side of that valley. Amounts approaching, maybe a 1/2 inch to a little bit over that, maybe even toward 1 inch, depending on where exactly you are in the valley here. And then even some of these amounts trying to get into the San Joaquin Valley, again, more so on the eastern side of it than not for some of those higher values. And then potentially some coastal precip here coming in anywhere from maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/10 of an inch if we're in some of these valleys, or maybe a 1/2 inch for some of these areas closer to the Bay Area. As we go through Sunday PM, can't rule out some kind of weak drizzle or onshore showers here in Southern California as the system comes all the way through. And this is where we start to see that rainfall, potentially some snowfall here at elevation in the interior on Sunday into Monday. And then we talked about that Monday AM increase in snowpack here across the upper Colorado River Basin. That takes us through next week and see some increased precip over here in eastern Montana, not as much getting into the Golden Triangle. We'll get snowpack here as well. I'll drag this all the way out Friday, Saturday, and then to Monday. You can see the weekend snowfall expected across the Cascades and the Sierra Nevadas. If we were to look at this in January or February, some of these numbers here barely approaching a foot in some of the highest elevations, I'd say, hey, this isn't much. This isn't going to improve our situation too much in terms of, remember, we're trying to get that snowpack back above average. But this is not nothing. We're in the middle of the snowmelt season right now, and at least for some areas here to the south, it's been a little bit warmer, including the Colorado River Basin. So, getting a little bump in the snowpack here, stretching that snowmelt season out a little bit, maybe slowing it down with some of the colder weather. I don't think that's a bad thing. It kind of increases the snowpack a little bit here. See those levels increasing in the upper Colorado River Basin here as we go through next week as well. Going to jump over. This is the snow water equivalent in that upper Colorado River Basin. So you're seeing it in map form a few times this year. This is this black line is the graphic as we've gone through the water year. You can see that we reached above average here in March and April. That is the good news. We've been in that snowmelt season now for a few weeks. We've actually been melting pretty quickly, a little bit quicker than average. That's not a bad thing, right? Because that water is going to get into the hydrology, the streams, and then the rivers, and then the reservoirs as well. But the slower that gets drawn out, the better. The more water we can save, the less flooding we have. So, the fact that we get a little bit more snow here on top of the fact that we have colder temperatures in the forecast, we might be able to slow this down a little bit, which makes it a little bit more manageable and better to hang onto that water. Jump over and look at Lake Powell. This is at Glen Canyon Dam in northern Arizona on the border with Utah. We had the snowmelt season last year in 2023. That's what you're seeing down here is these dates here through the summer. There's that snowmelt increasing the Lake Powell reservoir level. Of course, then through the summer, losing that. But then now, starting to pick up that snowmelt season again. I'll let that fade away. And you can see that inflection point. We've definitely turned the corner here. So expecting another rise here. And this is the goal here. I think with Lake Powell and Lake Mead, we started way down here at those near record low levels. Obviously, we had improvements last year with a big season, and we're expecting another improvement here, maybe not to that same level that we had last year, but getting that level up further and further, building that kind of stair step and building that savings bank is the goal here. One issue we dealt with last year in the Sierra Nevadas, we had a huge snowfall right in the Sierra Nevadas, but we had that big snowmelt season, that very rapid melting of that very anomalous snowpack. And that caused flooding issues in the Central Valley. I was showing satellite pictures like this at this exact time in May of 2023, and there were times when the Tulare Lake bed, which is just here in the San Joaquin Valley, was just inundated with water melting from the Sierra Nevadas to the east. And in fact, just kind of looking at this, if you were to compare, there's a lot, I can just tell, less snowpack here in May of this year than in 2023. Now, there's less, but we're still coming out of an above average year. So there will be snow melt. This will get into the reservoirs. You can see some of those here along the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. These all look good, talking about above historical averages at this point. But if you look at that Tulare Lake bed, well, we can see the lake bed. We don't see the lake here except for some exposed water here toward the south of it. So good news here, not seeing as much flooding, and that's, I think, the case going forward. Not expecting as many flooding concerns with less snow to melt out here. So kind of a silver lining to getting, not a record-breaking season here in 2024, but at least an above-average one to continue to build up those reservoirs above their historical average. I want to just double back really quick and look at the last 30 days of precipitation departure. Just a few quick stories here. Despite systems to talk about, regular systems coming through, Pacific Northwest running a little bit drier here, at least as we went through the end of spring through April. Not a huge concern right now. Not seeing any major drought increase here. There are some areas here that are running just a little bit on the drier side, particularly in southeastern Washington here. California's been, I think, more on the wetter side, say for some areas more in the north. Again, I just mean that relative to average. We've certainly had a number of systems come through here, but along the coast and parts of the Central Valley have had maybe more of a busy spring than usual. Jump back. These are the 7-day forecast anomalies for temperatures for the next 7 days. So this is kind of the quick story over the next 7 days for temperatures. Really cold relative to average across the Northwest. We'll be keeping an eye on potential frost and freeze concerns. We talked about a few of those. Cooler across the south as well, because that next trough coming in over the weekend is going to dip a little bit further south than that current one, which is situated more like this, but not seeing any big frost or freeze concerns right now, other than potentially a chilly night here over the weekend and maybe the Central Valley. Look at some of those forecast minimum temperatures. I'll just step through. This is Thursday a.m. Talked about the freeze warnings valid here in the upper Snake River Valley and eastern Idaho. Freezing temperatures here in the Golden Triangle, Montana. Some colder temperatures in eastern Washington. Not any major freezes further to the south in some of these sensitive agricultural areas. Take this into Friday morning. Not a big change in that forecast here. A little bit warmer for parts of the Snake River Valley. Warmer on Saturday in some of these locations, but then that next system starts to come on shore Saturday p.m. That's cooling things down now Sunday a.m. You can see colder temperatures into the 40s in the Central Valley, colder here along that California coastline, talking about potentially 40 degrees in some of these coastal municipalities, low 40s here in the Willamette Valley. That continuing Monday, cooler temperatures across some of these areas on the interior. Not seeing the freezes here, but getting down closer to frost territory in the Snake River Valley. Again, 40s in the Central Valley, low 40s in the Willamette Valley. Cold weather across the coastlines here, even down through Southern California here on Monday a.m. Again, these are overnight minimum temperatures, so daytime temperatures will be warmer, thankfully. Not even continuing on Tuesday a bit. That's where that National Weather Service forecast ends. If I take us out to Wednesday morning, this forecast is from the European Weather Model. We are talking minimum temperature forecasts now 7 days in advance, and those are never terribly accurate. But at the very least, it's highlighting, again, potential freeze concerns for the Snake River Valley. Potentially even frost all the way here through the middle Snake, even 40s now continuing in the Central Valley. We're talking 30s here in the Willamette Valley, 30s here in the Golden Triangle, 30s here in eastern Washington. So I showed you that 7-day forecast kind of aggregate picture with all those kind of cold colors across the west. What does that mean? Well, it means even through early next week into midweek, we're cold here across folks or above this line that I drew there. Look at that 7-day precipitation anomaly forecast. Kind of the big story here is increasing rainfall here across the Willamette Valley and the Cascades. We talked about that. Potentially 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. Unfortunately, the Golden Triangle looks to be missing out on some of this Montana rainfall. And then the foothills, the Sierra Nevada is getting some snow with less significant amounts in the Central Valley, save for some of those municipalities on that far eastern side there, and maybe the Bay Area getting at least some decent precipitation, nothing too extreme here as we go through the weekend. If we take that forecast out, this is looking at the GFS ensemble forecast, trying to get us an idea of where we're going after that fork in the road Wednesday to Thursday of next week. That's something I'm interested in. Do we get that retrograding trough that's going to linger around and stay blocked and, just kind of cause more inclement weather, at least cooler weather to deal with in the more southern states? This GFS ensemble is trying to show more of a ridge here, trying to push into the Pacific Northwest area. That would increase temperatures here as we get toward next weekend. You can see something of maybe trying to produce a cutoff flow here to the southwest of California as that ridge builds in. This looks a little blocky to me as well. But I would say maybe less inclement or less cooler for folks across the west region. If we jump over and look at the ECMWF forecast, again, this is looking Saturday through Sunday of next weekend. Looking way out now. You can see along the coastline here, even maybe into the California Central Coast, a little bit of a warm up in temperatures after what's likely to be over the next kind of 7 days, a much cooler forecast. Some of these colder anomalies lingering across the interior. So there is a kind of glimmer of hope here, despite a not so friendly 7-day forecast, that we might be warming up, at least in these immediate western or northwest states as we head toward next weekend. Just something to keep an eye on. As far as precipitation over that time, not looking at huge amounts of precipitation. This is looking at a 24-hour rolling window. I'm going back and forth here, so let me slow down. We've already talked about the weekend precipitation. You'll see that come in here from this GFS ensemble. Because it's an ensemble forecast, as a lot of these model runs, it doesn't have near the resolution of what we were looking at earlier. But as I take it into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, I'm just looking at hints of precipitation and where it might come on Thursday, Friday, now Saturday. Because we had that trough kind of retrograding in action like this, some lingering interior showers, but it didn't look like the wettest pattern I've ever seen. Certainly not any major system coming off the coast. A lot of these videos that I've done over the last 3 to 4 weeks, if you look out into the long range, there's always that next system that appears to be coming on shore. Something coming in like this or like that would bring precip here to California or Oregon. Despite that trough kind of retrograding, not seeing a big precip maker even out toward next weekend, now Sunday, Monday of that week after next. So we're getting way out there now and not seeing any big precip makers for the immediate West Coast. So I think that's good news for folks who are tired of the kind of frequent rainfall that we've seen. If we look at the 6 to 10 day outlook for temperatures next week, no surprise here from the Climate Prediction Center. Big bullseye over parts of Northern California, Nevada, and Oregon, extending outward from there. 6 to 10 day precip, talking about extended amounts of precipitation chances here for the Northwest, similar to what we just talked about. It's really kind of after that fork in the road, that 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, or at the very least in kind of that same area that we drew where we might be seeing that warm up. They've pulled that back to near normal. So perhaps getting to more seasonal temperatures finally for the immediate West Coast as we go out toward next weekend with some of those cooler temperatures lingering in the interior. And then precipitation, not too much to talk about. I mentioned that trough more like this, no big system coming off the coast, maybe some interior shower chances, but not too much to talk about as we get toward the middle of May. Look at the monthly temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. I'm showing this, it just came out yesterday. Seeing just this near normal chance here for Southern California. We have some cooler waters here off the West Coast, expecting that active severe weather season to continue here in the Central Plains for all the reasons we talked about. Kind of combine the two, I would think that jet stream is just going to kind of keep lingering over this area at least weekly, likely keeping the west region through May a little bit cooler than not. I guess they're extending that now down through Southern California, but not seeing a big kind of signal that we're going to be really warm in the west or we're going to be really cold as we go through the month of May. If anything, kind of leaning toward more seasonal or cooler, in my opinion. I don't think this forecast here disagrees with that. Look at the monthly precipitation outlook for May. This is an area, right, we're concerned about extending dryness through the summer, so not a surprise to see this below average polygon here, kind of semicircle, if you will. But getting into May, the west region, we don't get a lot of precipitation around this time, so not a big signal here. That's to be expected as we go through some of the summer months. Just never a big signal either way until we get into the next water year. I want to jump over and show you, this is for Salinas, California, and I wanted to show you the temperature graphic that we've accrued this year. So if you look at this graphic, I pulled this up on ag-wx.com. It's a site a colleague, Eric Snodgrass, and I have put up here just to give us some weather graphics for these different municipalities. You're welcome to, you can come here and play around with the graphics. I think it's just kind of a neat tool, and you can plug in your city here. And I just went and did that for Salinas, California, on the central coastline there, nestled in the valley. These are all the temperature averages we've had through this year. You can actually look and see from the start of the year each day. At least if you look, since we had some of this anomalous warm weather in January, we've definitely had more days maybe on this colder side, at least, in terms of intensity. It's been more toward the cool end, at least for now. So potentially because of those cooler waters off the coast, I think this is also related to that severe weather season we've seen out east. If it's colder out west, we tend to bring that jet stream down and bring up more intense severe weather activity. But we have been colder than average, a little bit of a concern maybe for heat units going forward. So looking potentially at more warm weather, at least out in that 8 to 14 day outlook, which is kind of something I've kept an eye on. Another way to visualize this is year-to-date GDD accumulations. If you look at this yellow bar, that's kind of the confidence interval here, but it's hard to see. There's this kind of white line here in the middle of the yellow. That's your 20-year average GDD accrual. And you can see 762 is where we're at this year, at least from the start of the year. And that's certainly below average, not south of that yellow 20-year range. It's not extreme at this point, but definitely lower than a number of these last few years, which are dashed here just above it. In fact, they're all above it from 2022, 23, even through 2018. So giving you just kind of a hint of how much colder we've been this spring, accruing those GDDs. I think part of the reason for that, we've had the El Nino, which has brought a number of systems through, keeping those temperatures down, along with cold fronts. But that El Nino has also helped to kind of bring some temperatures down here slowly in this eastern Pacific area. When this gets a little bit cooler in spring, we can get some colder weather into the immediate west coast. So I think that's playing a role as well. We actually see that show up when La Nina starts to strengthen. So it is connected to that as well, this kind of negative PDO signature, as we call it, that sets up off the west coast. When this cools down, it tends to do so in concert with those Pacific Ocean temperatures at the equator. And kind of right on time, you can see this colder tongue of water extending further west into the Pacific. And it seems to change that color to whatever color I'm hovering over, which is the not exactly what I want. There you go. It's a little bit more visible. You can see those colder waters there, kind of signifying the start of not necessarily La Nina proper now, but we're shifting quickly toward that direction, whether we become a strong, moderate, weak, where we exactly land in terms of that La Nina is yet to be seen, but we're definitely pointing in that direction going forward. This sea surface temperature anomaly map is looking La Nina-y more and more to me. And now we're not talking about, if you look at these videos over the last few weeks, we talked about maybe some little signatures of colder water near the Galapagos. Now we're talking about more of a real signature stretching out along the equator. That's all I have for you all here today. If you want to sign up for a weekly email report that's kind of a companion to these videos here, it'll hit your inbox tomorrow morning. That is Thursday morning every week. Totally free. You're welcome to do so on this link here up in the URL box. You don't have to put your name if you don't want to, just need your email to sign up. And I'll put that link down below in the subscription as well. Just another way to receive the reports if you don't watch the videos as often. I think that's all I have for you all here today on Wednesday. Until we talk next week, thanks for watching.